All right, the last concept of this lecture series, Concept 5. Discuss the rise and fall of the Whig Party and show how its downfall led to the creation of the Republican Party. The controversies that revolved around Andrew Jackson stimulated the formation of the Second American Party system. The term Whig was first introduced in 1832 by the anti-tariff anti-tariff leaders of South Carolina. But it soon came to be applied to all elements that found themselves opposed to the Jacksonian Democratic Party. The Whigs first emerged as an identifiable group in the Senate, where Clay and Calhoun joined forces in 1834 to pass a motion censuring Jackson for his removal of federal deposits from the Second Bank of the United States. The Whigs soon evolved into a potent national political force by attracting other groups into a loose coalition alienated by Jackson. So the Whigs essentially is a party that's anti-Jackson. One, and the coalition is as such. One, national Republican supporters of Clay, Adams, and the American system. Two, Southern planters and states' rights groups led by Calhoun who were opposed to Jackson's stand on nullification. Three, former administration supporters alienated by Jackson's bank policy. Four, Northern industrialists whose views were represented by Daniel Webster from Massachusetts and after 1836. Five, the remnants of the anti-Masonic Party. So that would be after 1836. Thus, the Jackson's economic and political practices inspired opposition from all three sections of the country, giving the Whig Party a truly national character. The name Whig was chosen because it suggested that as the Whigs from the 1770s had stood up against King George III, so the Whigs of the 1830s were fighting for liberty against King Andrew I, meaning Andrew Jackson, of course. The Whigs believed it was natural for a relatively few individuals to acquire a large share of the wealth. They believed the increasing concentrations of power and wealth that accompanied the advance of modern banking, manufacturing, and transportation furthered the welfare of the entire community. So this is, the Whigs are going to be very much in support of trickle-down economics or supply-side economics. The Northern Whigs attempted to reconcile their elitism with Republican ideals in several ways. First, they asserted that American society was really classless because it did not ascribe permanent status to a group and individuals, and because its institutions fostered upward mobility. So, in other words, if you were born poor and you stayed poor, well, that would be your choice given the opportunities that were around you. Second, they argued that it was natural in a republic for wealthy individuals to represent other citizens. Constrained by a republican constitution and by moral influences of religion, elites would govern in the best interests of all. Third, the Whigs argued that the ruling class promoted industrialization and economic growth, which in turn strengthened the republic by creating a more prosperous citizenry and by merging the interests of labor and capital. Four, the Southern Whigs, represented by Calhoun, argued that the Northern Whig ideal of equal opportunity contradicted the realities of slavery and of industrial society. Calhoun felt the Southern slave owners and the Northern factory owners belonged to the same privileged class and faced the same threat from below. He therefore urged Northern factory capitalists to join a defensive alliance with the planters. Calhoun's views was that social harmony was possible only with recognition, acceptance, and reinforcement of existing sharp distinctions of class. Whigs, he argued, ought to unite under a common defense of privilege and social order. The significance of the Whig Party was that it was a national party that represented the interests of both the large industrialists and the planter aristocracy at once, and provided a means by which the two economic groups could possibly work out their differences. The Whigs criticized Jackson and the Democrats for underestimating the possibilities for upward mobility, for pitting poor against the rich, which is sometimes referred to as class warfare, and disrupting social harmony. They attacked Jackson's strong presidency by warning against strong, highly individualistic executives. As an alternative, the Whigs offered legislative rule and a program of governmental intervention in the economy. They wanted to see a more vigorous national government with Congress rather than the president exercising leadership. They attempted to turn Jackson's Republican rhetoric against him. They were able to do this against Jackson's successor, Martin Van Buren, in the election of 1840. The Whigs found to their delight that the Panic of 1837 and the rapid industrialization that was taking place in the United States had marked impacts on in politics. It has going to have a great effect on politics. The industrialization strengthened the commitment of the urban middle class and prosperous farmers of the North to the values of the business elite, to the Whig Party, and to their economic programs of the American system. With William Henry Harrison's presidential victory over Martin Van Buren in the election of 1840, the Whigs' political future looked bright. The Whigs lost their opportunity, however, when Harrison died of pneumonia in 1841, 1 month after inauguration. His successor was Vice President John Taylor, a Virginian who was not a true supporter of the American system. Tyler opposed the urban commercial interest in his own state and had become a Whig because of his disgust with Jacksonian nationalism and his own enthusiasm for states' rights. As president, Tyler's prime objective was to block the nationalizing economic programs of his own party. He succeeded, vetoing 2 bills sponsored by Henry Clay to reestablish the National Bank. He also blocked major protective tariffs. Tyler limited Whig successes to the repeal of the independent treasury in 1841 as well, and a modest increase in tariffs in 1842. As a result, the Whig Party broke with Tyler, and his cabinet resigned, with the exception of Secretary of State Daniel Webster. Tyler appointed Democrats to replace them, but kept Webster in the cabinet in order to maintain a tie with New England and to claim that he had bipartisan support. In 1844, James K. Polk, a Jacksonian Democrat from Tennessee, defeated the Whig candidate Henry Clay in the presidential election. Clay's defeat was the final blow to the American system and the Whigs' economic program. The issue of the annexation of Texas and the extension of slavery into Western territories in time proved a menace to solidarity of the party. The stage was now set for a replacement of Clay's American system by the issue of free soil, keeping slavery out of the new territories is basically what free soil ideology is all about, as a central economic issue. This new issue led to sectional disputes between the Southern Whigs, Cotton Whigs, sometimes known as, who were pro-slavery, as opposed to the Northern Whigs, who were opposed to the expansion of slavery. Not slavery itself, just the expansion of it. During the 1840s, conflict over the legal status of slavery resulted when both Northerners and Southerners moved into Western areas that were to be organized as territories in preparation for statehood. To Southern planners, the chance that Americans could seize northern Mexico and secure it for slavery seemed a possible solution to their anxiety over the abolitionist threat to slavery. The South's ambitions produced a major fracture in the Whig Party and a lesser break in the Democratic Party between Southerners loyal to slavery and Northerners who supported free soil. During the 1840s and 50s, as both Northerners and Southern Whigs became more entrenched in their position, they drove a wedge between themselves that undermined the party's national base. The end came for the Whigs and the American national two-party system in the 1850s, with the passage of the Compromise of 1850, which made California into a free state and allowed for fugitive slaves to be returned to their owners from the North. The Whig Party barely survived as a result of the hard feelings and lack of trust that developed out of the debate and the formation of the Compromise of 1850. 4 years later, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which provided for the possibility of slavery in Kansas, which had been forbidden under the Missouri Compromise, effectively destroyed the Whigs and led to the formation of today's Republican Party. Underlining the rapid growth of the Republican Party was the strong and growing appeal of its position on slavery in the territories. Republicans viewed the unsettled West as a land of opportunities, a place of which the ambitious and hardworking could migrate in the hopes of improving their social and economic position. Free soil would serve as a guarantee of free competition or the right to rise. But if slavery was permitted to expand, the rise of free labor would be denied, because people just couldn't compete with large slave plantations out in the West. Slaveholders would monopolize the best land, use their slaves to compete unfairly with free white workers, and block efforts at commercial and industrial development. Some Republicans also pandered to race prejudice. They presented their policy as a way to keep blacks out of the territories, thus preserving the new lands acquired from the Mexican-American War for exclusive white occupancy. Although passage of the Kansas-Nebraska Act raised the territorial issue and gave birth to the Republican Party, it was the turmoil associated with the attempts to implement popular sovereignty in Kansas that kept the issue alive and enabled the Republicans to increase their following throughout the North and to become a strong second party by the election of 1856. The second quarrel deepened and became virtually irreconcilable in the years between the Democrats' election of Buchanan in 1856 and the Republicans' victory with Lincoln in 1860. A series of incidents provoked one side or the other, heightened the tensions, and ultimately brought a crisis to a head. Behind the panicky reaction to public events lay a growing sense that the North and the South were so different in culture and so opposed in basic interests that they could no longer coexist in the same nation. And this will conclude Concept 5, and so the end of the lecture on the American two-party system. And the next lecture, of course, will be the Civil War, the causes of the Civil War, and the legacy of the Civil War. I'll talk to you guys later. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns.